Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for being here again. Today I'm really excited because I'm talking with Paulina Howfield. Hello, Paulina.
Hi, Sharon. Nice to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, thank you for being here. Paulina is in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't this awesome to be talking clear across the world?
Yeah,
And
the
I
world
know
is
it's
a beautiful
amazing.
place. Yeah.
Definitely. So I'm really excited. We are going to be talking about some amazing things. So let me read your bio first, and then we will dive in.
Okay.
Okay. Paulina is passionate about the ascension process of Earth and the awakening of galactic memory in humanity. In her work, she helps people remember their true nature, align with divine love, elevate their frequencies, make contact with divine beings. Her connection with the soul of the Earth is part of this as it leads us on a journey of enlightenment and also offers profound experiences of the divine. Plus, it helps us understand our cosmic blueprint and the real truth about our species. Oh, thank you. Our planet and her history, which is important in the quest for galactic memory. So true. Paulina has had contact and paranormal experiences all her life, communicating with and being visited by star beings, alien intelligences, I try to say, animals and dead people. I see dead people. She, she also has an empathic, intuitive understanding of humans, animals, and nature. At 25, she had a near-death experience that changed her frequencies and activated divine cosmic memory. It taught her about navigating the afterlife and creating matter out of light, and also offered explanations for her paranormal experiences, innate healing skills, and mediumship abilities. While she offers consultations as a healer, earth energy specialist, art therapist, and shamanic practitioners, since the NDE, she spends most of her time working as an esoteric map maker and earth whisperer. Can't wait to hear about that. In that capacity, she works in union with the soul consciousness of the earth and many different beings and emissaries, helping them to cleanse and reactivate energies and interdimensional portals at planetary and cosmic sites. She also explores and decodes the geomythic and archetypal templates on Earth and in the cosmos that help us remember our star seeding and galactic heritage. So important. Paulina shares this information at conference and events, in articles, talks, and on social media. And you can find more at her website, www.theearthwhisperer.com. I'm so impressed.
Thank you for persevering. It's a bit, it's lots of words there.
Oh, hey, that's what we are. We're humans and we use words to get ideas across, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I'm really excited to talk to you. How about, do you mind starting out with your near-death experience and telling us about that?
Sure. I'm very happy to do that. When I was 25, as you mentioned in the bio, I had been in Turkey for about 6 months doing some earth energy work there and traveling through there, and I arrived into Israel via Rhodes. And at the time I went through Rhodes, there was some kind of a shutdown, something wasn't happening, and so the boat that I was on would have normally just had a brief stop at Rhodes and continued on, but we stopped for a couple of days. And while I was, we meaning the people on the boat, because I was traveling by myself. And while I was there, bought water along with many other people, and the water was supposedly fresh water, but wasn't fresh water. So I then had what would be an equivalent of a deli belly. I was sick for a period of time, and I share that as the preemptor to what happened, because it was about identifying what was going on in my body. So I was in Israel, and I was living in a community, and I felt close to Jesus and close to the history of that story. And my stomach was unhappy, and there was lots of me trying different things. I've always been somebody who will do herbs and medicines of a complementary health variety. So I was doing that and I wasn't getting any better. And eventually I started to think, well, maybe this is not my stomach as such and my digestive system, maybe this is something else. So anyway, I went to see a specialist and I was told that I had a cyst on an ovary. And he said to me that it was very large and I needed to be careful and then it could rupture. And I remember, and he then said, go back to where you are, rest, and come and see me at a future point. And I remember when I left his rooms thinking, I wonder how you know if a cyst ruptures. Like, I wonder how you know it's time to go to an emergency situation. It turns out it's actually really easy to know because chaos goes on in the body. Well, certainly did in my body. So later that night, I saw him probably about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 to 4. Later that night at about 10 o'clock, I just felt very, very, very unwell and searing pain. And I thought, okay, this is what he was meaning. And it was like a drug had gone through my body. And so everything was shaking and trembling. I was feeling unwell and knew I needed help. And I knew that I needed to get to a hospital. I was living in a community, and so I asked for somebody to go and find somebody, That sort of, can you please find somebody? And I don't know who you'd find, but to help. And by chance, it was the community nurse who came. And then there was someone in the community who worked as was a student doctor. So they both came. I walked to the car. It was a smallish car. And there was discussion. Obviously, there was going to be a driver. There was discussion about where I would sit. And the nurse suggested that I sit in the back and lay down. And I'm tall. I couldn't really lay down properly. But I also knew instinctively, if I lay down, whatever was going on, if I lay down, I would not survive. And it wasn't a panic. It wasn't I'm definitely not laying down because if I do, I'll die. It was more like I just knew instinctively, don't lay down. And so I rested my feet against the other door. And then I had my hips against the door on the left-hand side of the car. And I was resting up on the, halfway up the door of the car. I had my head resting on the window so I could see out. And it was a night sky because it was about 10:30, something like that. And I remember just the glass on the on the car door was very cool. And I remember thinking, oh, this is nice. It's like, it's cool. I've got so much heat and tremor and stuff going on in my body. It's nice. And I was struggling to breathe. And so I was like I said, I wasn't panicking about anything. I just knew this was happening. And I was going with it as much as I could, but I was also concentrating on breathing, concentrating on allowing what was happening to the degree I could, while also looking after my body, if that makes sense. So we head off to the hospital, and it was about, I'd say about 35 to 40 minutes away. I'm not exactly sure because I'd never done the drive before. And as we set off in the car, like I said, put my head against the window, and I was watching the stars and just taking that relief of the cool window. And I was breathing and focusing on my breathing. And then I kind of this blue eye came to the crown chakra or third eye and began to pull me out. And it wasn't a pulling sensation, and it wasn't I was being dragged, but I was clear that's where I was going. So I went, and then I was out of my body, and I was out into about maybe, anyway, it's hard to know when you're out of a physical thing how far high you really are, but I could see the top of the car, I could see the top of the trees, I could see houses in the distance. So I don't know, maybe 1,000 feet, 3,000 feet, something like that. And then I took a few more breaths because I was still trying to get my body to sort myself, because I wasn't in my body and I wasn't attached to my body, but I knew that my body was doing something. And then I went out higher and I could see the landscape. I could see miles and miles away where the cities were. I could see the lights of the cities. I could see highways with the sort of lights on them. And then I got higher and higher, and then I was out, could see the curvature of the earth. And I could see, I was in space and I could see the planets. And while I was in space, and there was this sound that was like a what I would now call would be the sound of the universe, the different sounds of frequencies and so on. And I could hear that, but I could also hear like wind. It was not, it was a bit of a cacophony in a way, but it was also quite melodious. So it was interesting, bit of both. And then I was out in space and I was thinking, wow, if anyone asked me anything about anything, I know the answer. That's fascinating. And then the wind rushed through, and then the fire rushed through, and then water rushed through, and then the earth rushed through. And so it was like, oh, I'm not a body. And none of us are bodies. We're actually matter in form. And then I was kind of in wonderment of that. And then I was further out in space, and I felt like I was coming home. I felt like it was really familiar, but more, not so much about the familiarity, just the deep feeling of this is, gosh, I've missed this, and it's home, and it's wonderful, and that longing. And love was the foundation of everything. I was really absolutely clear of that. And then I was in what can best be termed as corridors of light, or a corridor of light. But it wasn't a corridor, and it had doors, but it didn't have doors. And the whole experience, the same as when I say there was a blue eye and there was a blue light and so on. I'm trying to find ways to describe stuff that actually isn't of this dimension. And yes. The colors were not, I've not seen that color on 3D. Yeah. And so this was a bit like being in sort of clouds. There was a pathway or a room. I don't know whether it was a pathway or a room or whatever, but there were doors, and the doors were open, and I could access all those doors if I wished to. But it was also a sense of, for me, of what was in those doors or behind those doors, or the doors were open, was I was accessing anyway. So I didn't need to go in a room. I could access that. And I was sort of having a sense of just this being in the sea of consciousness, being in that place of knowing, having absolute connection with everything, knowing absolutely everything, and not in a I'm so clever way, more in a wondrous, oh my gosh, this is amazing way. And I also had this sense of, I didn't have a life review, but a sense of things that in my life that I had thought, not so much I had thought were important, but that I had carried. So like at the time, I had done for some time, I'd carried a backpack on my back. And when you carry a backpack on your back, at the end of the day, when you take it off, it's a relief. And it was like that. It was like, oh, okay, that I don't need to carry that anymore. It's gone. And then I also started to just experience that sort of sense of, okay, a oneness and a connection at a deeper level. You're not your body, you're not your thoughts, you're not your emotions, you're not your mind. None of us are. I'd always believed in the afterlife and past lives as a child, and I'd had connection with different things. And so I had all that going on, and then I was suddenly back down in my body. And And the woman who was the nurse had realized I'd lost a pulse, and she was in a state of trying to make sure that I was alive, and was touching my hand, and then she was touching my neck. And then over a period of the next 24 to 36 hours, I left my body a few times because I couldn't stay in. And I realized, and I didn't know how I realized that, but I realized that my oversoul, which doesn't necessarily normally reside in the body, but is strongly connected to the body and the to some degree the personality, like it's not the higher self, it's something different to that, was actually trying to mesh this new frequency that I was at and meld me in back into the body, and I couldn't stay in. And I knew that water was going to do it. So I ended up, and I wasn't really walking at that point, so I crawled to the shower, put the water on. And then when the water came on the top of my head and then down my body, I started to think, okay, I'm going to come out of this now. I'm going to survive this. But again, none of this was done with a panic of, oh my God, I'm going to die. It was more like when you get that certainty and you know, okay, that's the thing I needed to do because now I'm going to survive this. And then of course I had an injured body, which I needed to do to get some healing on and some surgery on. And I went back to the UK to get some of that done. And then while I was there, I also felt like I needed to do some study of some certain things. And so the process of integration and understanding more about what I was going to do with that experience and why I had that experience was already working by that time.
That's amazing. Did you remember all that in real time?
Do you mean as it happened?
As it happened, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Because my memories didn't come to me until later. It took a while for me to be able to integrate it, but that's amazing. Yeah.
I think that's an interesting point too, because like I remembered as it happened, but I also would be very open to saying there's things about it that I don't remember.
Good point.
Because I think that how they manifest, what we understand from them, and also how we integrate them over the years,
right,
that facilitates that process, doesn't it?
Yes, yes, definitely. I believe so. So when you had this experience and you left your body and you had all this wisdom that came to you, or all this knowledge that returned to you, I guess we could say, my question would be on when you were in the body at that age, were you a spiritual person? Were you aware of things? Were you a seeker? Or do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would say, yes, I was.
Okay.
And I would say that I was born like that. And so while, excuse me, while I would never have thought I would have a near-death experience, like, yeah, I mean, it wasn't something I really thought about. I believed that those things could happen, but I never really thought about it. But I think that some of the reasons I had it was to fully establish that spirituality, or that spiritual side of me, that past life side of me, those things of me that were open to all of that, but needed to come together and recognize it, to take it forward as a consciously participating being. So my oversoul could work with that. My oversoul and my soul could work together in this body. And that wasn't fully happening before because of the frequencies of the physical body. And also, I'm not necessarily somebody who talks about my experiences. And in a way, while they can seem quite extraordinary, they're quite ordinary. So for me, the experiences I had as a child in my spirituality and my understanding were just things that were there for me. So I was in wonderment about them, but I wasn't in wonder that I needed to speak to somebody about it. Can you help me? I can't figure this out. It was more was happening. This was just an accepted part of who I was, but I wasn't fully integrating that in order for me to do what I came to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. And that's, you make a good point that especially as a child and even as an adult now, being in tune and having these psychic abilities, I guess we call them psychic abilities, or being in tune, it is natural for us. Not being in tune is unnatural, right? And so
Yeah.
we've been, yeah, and I feel that we've been, and you, I don't know if you would agree or not, but we've been cut off from our natural abilities to be in tune with source, with our gifts or abilities or whatever, you know, we have within us, on that, you know, that inner part of us.
Yes, I think there's various reasons why that has happened, including deliberate things put in place to encourage humanity to separate from that.
Yes.
I think also there's just a less sinister form of collective programming and people just living their lives and following other people's truths and not their own, all that sort of stuff. So I think there's a whole load of layers. I always talk about layers because I think there's, in any situation, it's not black or white, there's layers. And yeah, I think we have been encouraged as a human species to forget. And I think we've also had the fall of consciousness, which was part of our evolutionary process. So a whole combination of things have participated in that separation that people feel, that disconnect that people feel, the lack of intuition and capacity to discriminate. All those things are the results of part of that.
Yeah. Thank you. Definitely. So it's so profound. Wow. That's really profound. Thank you for sharing that. I'm honored that you shared that.
Oh, well, it's an honor. Thank you. And and I share it because I hope that in some way it helps people. I mean, I know when I returned, not that I went anywhere, but you know, that feeling
right
afterwards. I didn't have a, oh my God, I've got to find out all the information I can about it, because again, it was an integrated process and a remembering process for me. But I did, at the time, there was a lot of investigation in near-death experiences starting, you know, and they were bringing it into a more scientific endeavor of understanding these experiences. And they had specific questions they asked. And I've mentioned this before about in other conversations I've had with people about the 5 predominant questions that they would ask experiences. And 2 of them were, did you see a tunnel? And did you go into the light? And they were based on other people's experiences. But they became the 2 predominant things. And there were lots of questions being asked, but they were always geared towards proof of something and not consciousness experiencing itself. And so I always found it difficult because there was that aspect for me, because this is not about whether you saw a blue being or a blue light or you saw your mother or you saw the dog. They are wonderful experiences, but it's the cumulativeness of consciousness that was never really explored, and we're starting to explore that now in these sorts of in experiences. And the other thing I never came across, and I'm not saying that hasn't happened for other people, but I never came across it, was the 4 elements, the earth, air, fire, and water. So that was also something I knew was specific to me. Specific, we're all part of that, but that was a teaching specific to me, and I needed to understand that more. And part of the beginning of that was working with people who were dying, and also I was studying. I'd already studied art and aspects of psychology and education, and so I went back and I was studying the transformational and transpersonal side of art therapy, because I thought this is all about non-verbal, right brain, intuitive, divine feminine, all that sort of stuff. How can I find a way to help people in a therapeutic, healing, perhaps even shamanic way at that point, to help them help themselves without words? Because it's not about, for me, it's not about words.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, I find that your experience is unique with what, some of the experiences I've learned about, listened to, or read, is that you were not met by anyone.
No.
Yeah. That's, I find unique. And I know my heart and soul tells me, and you might agree with this, that everyone has the experience that they need at that time, or that, our oversoul or higher self caters to what we need at that time, brings us what we need at that time.
Yes, I agree. And I think, and there are people who have what they consider terrible experiences. And I don't want to say they're to blame for that experience, but I think each experience comes for a different reason, to help us understand something and potentially grow from it. Right. I also, I've done research, I've talked about these and I've researched it. I really think that NDEs are triggered and placed in the framework of the subtle bodies of the soul for a particular time to happen, and whether that's part of our soul agreement on coming here, part of a process of remembering, taking us back to deep cosmic memory, and also to activate something within ourselves that we felt was really important. And I think it comes down to where we have it, the people we're with when we have it, or whether we're by ourselves. I think all of those things are soul triggers. And I think if we look at it from a place of a point of view of it being a soul trigger, it changes how we look at them. Because it makes sense. Soul trying to communicate something, right, and helping us get back on track.
Right. That's definitely been the theme in a lot of near-death experiences that I've, I don't recall any that I've heard about where that wasn't part of the deal, where it's helping a person take one path or get back on track, like you said. Definitely. And a lot of the themes I found is after someone has a near-death experience, that their life gets kind of turned upside down. Did that happen with you, Paulina?
I don't feel my memory I don't feel it did, because I think I lived a different life anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And all of the, and it's very hard to describe it, because it if I hadn't had it, I think I'd still be doing what I'm doing, but I wouldn't be doing it to the same degree of consciousness. I think that's the thing. So there was already some kind of sense in me on some level, not necessarily, and when I'm this age, I'll do that. And, it's not that kind of left brain way of thinking about it, but those things were already present and resonant for me. So it didn't turn my life upside down. My health needed attention. And I went into remembering some things in a very short space of time and having changes in my contact experiences. But it didn't feel like my life had gone upside down. It felt more like it was exactly where it was supposed to be.
Okay. That's beautiful. Yeah. So that makes that resonates, that you were already on a path that you had written for yourself or planned for yourself. So you didn't need anything maybe that was so drastic. Of course, dying is always drastic, and being sick like that from the body, but the experience itself, I mean, it sounds so profound. but I know a lot of people get messages, like we need to do this or this has to happen or whatever, you know what I mean? So it sounds like that was not something that your oversoul or your higher self felt. You at the
No,
time.
I get information and messages and things like that throughout my life.
Right,
In
right.
that particular instance, what I got, one of the really strong things I got from it was just because, and now I'm saying it how I'm going to say it, not necessarily how I received the information,
Sure.
but just because other people don't believe in this stuff. And so when I had my experience, it was a different world. Just because other people don't experience this stuff or don't talk about this stuff, do not assume, you've been right all this time to know it's true, and hold that frequency in your heart and never let it go. So, and it was a reminder. It wasn't like telling me you've let it go and you need to pick it up. It wasn't that. It was more, it's going to be a tough one, but this is what you came to do, and sharing this is part of that process. And even if other people aren't interested in it, not to stand up on a soapbox and say this is it and this is how it is, but always be present to being part of the stuff that you know and the stuff that you remember and where we're heading within the consciousness awakening and the planetary ascension and our human ascension. Because what you know, and what you don't know, you don't say you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think that's been a part of that for me strongly.
Yeah, I'm going to imagine that would definitely recalibrate you. Right? Because you mentioned in your bio that you were thrown to another frequency, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like to share maybe about how that changed your life afterwards with because you have encounters with extraterrestrials, and you said you had numerous STEs. What's an STE?
Spiritually transformative experience.
Oh, okay.
There are some people who can accept that someone has a spiritually transformative experience, but not an NDE. I think that's an interesting thing that's happened in a process of time. But like if somebody said to me, look, you didn't have a near-death experience, you had a spiritually transformative experience. It's like, okay.
What's the difference? I don't know what the difference is.
So again, it's that terminology that we use to try to explain things, and the left brain gets hooked on, it's like all these little hooks that people hook everything on. But the right brain and the direct experience and the heart just experiences it and knows and develops it. So the frequencies changed, and that was where I couldn't kind of stay in for a while, and then I needed to take care of those things and also allow my body to do what it needed to do. So I had to pay attention on those things. And while I'm strongly empathic and a medium and clairsentient and all those things, I've always had a very strong grounding on the planet. That's been a bonus for me. I've also always had a tendency to, even as a young child and young adult, in fact, some of my friends always said, oh, nutters always hang around you, which I thought was really unfair. I thought it was unfair to me, but also unfair to the other people. But they say, oh, nutters hang around. And for a while I took that, like, what does that mean? And is that personal, whatever, when someone says something and you just kind of trying to figure it out. And a few people said it. And for me, it was that sense of, if I sat on a park bench, say, or if I was walking down the street or I was doing something, somebody would come and sit next to me who would be considered either a nutter or didn't belong in what the culture thought people should be. You know, so it might be a homeless person, it might be someone who was having a schizophrenic moment, or a child in need, or an elderly person, whoever it was. And that was also something that was innate in me. It was like a capacity to be with a person however they were at that time. So I had this capacity to be with people in the space that they were in, and never felt that there was any judgment or anything like that. And so I had a natural capacity to hold space. I had a natural capacity for intuition, and I had a natural capacity for mediumship. Now that was expanded upon in the frequency shifting. So I already had some of that. So it just took it to a different frequency. So in that sense, it didn't kind of, in some ways it blasted the body, but it didn't blast my mind, because my mind already knew that those things were there. And then I was also very familiar with being in the right brain as a sensory, kinesthetic, medium, and empath. It's like those things for me were very right brain. So it was about using the body as a vehicle for that. And in the experience of the NDE and having the energetic frequencies changing, what that also did was activated something in me that I had done before. And that like when we're all born, we're born on rays of service. I'm sure you know that. We're born on different colored rays of service. And in my capacity with the work that I came to do, I was born, I had the frequency placed ready to work with all the rays. And so all the ray masters, all the angels and the different cosmic beings on different rays, that's one aspect of it. I had always been very interested in myths and archetypal resonances in stories and things like that. So that was another aspect of it, because that's a more esoteric understanding of those rays and that information. I had the intuition, I had all these other things in place. So it's kind of like what it did was shift it to another dimensional aspect of it. And if I had been somebody, and I have met people, and I'm sure you have too, who had nothing happening in their lives before that they would think was remotely energetically inclined, spiritually inclined. They may even call themselves atheists or some other term. If I had been like that, it would have knocked me sideways. But I wasn't like that. So it became a process of integrating it at higher frequencies so that I could continue the work. So yes, it's caused some other things. And like you and I had a discussion earlier in the piece before we came on about frequencies and computers and the sensitivities that we have and those sorts of things. So there's stuff that goes on there, and feeling quite peculiar in the world, that weird alert thing that we get a lot, and we're different. And I don't say that in like a badge of honor. I say that sometimes it's like these journeys are not as glamorous and exciting as people think they are.
Boy, that's the truth. Yeah.
And I consciously committed to this journey in other lifetimes, and I've consciously committed to it again, and I'm really passionate about it, and I will do everything and anything I can to facilitate that process. But it can make for a very lonely journey, and it can also make for a very long journey in the when you think of what's happening now on the planet. Mm-hmm. This wasn't happening back then, and so you hold the frequency and you hold the space, whereas now somebody has it and it's like everyone's excited for them and happy for them, and way, that's great, everyone can come in to create this new earth frequency together, all those sorts of wonderful things. Back then it was like you had to kind of navigate mud.
Yeah. I'll never forget after my mother passed and I had an out-of-body experience and I ended up on Venus. And I just knew it was Venus. I could see the planet telling me it was Venus. And my mother met me and she looked so young and vibrant. And she was sick and she was ill when she passed in her 70s. And I asked her, I said, Mom, do you like being on Venus better than you like being on Earth? She said, oh, yes. Being on Earth is like being stuck in the mud.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and you can understand knowing that, and that's very nice that you had that experience with your mother on Venus as well. But knowing that, why so many of these experiences happen to people, because it's like, it's very, very difficult for a lot of people to maintain holding that frequency when they're here.
Oh, yeah.
And I think
definitely.
that will change in the future, and is changing now. But
Right.
It's and in all cultures, as you know, anywhere on the world, on the earth, and in different cosmoses and galaxies, there is this impulse to become who we really are. And yet, and that's because we forgot so profoundly who we are.
It's definitely getting stronger and stronger.
Isn't
stronger and stronger. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. Would you mind telling us about I want to talk about the galactics and all that too, and get into that topic while we're here. And we're going to have to do another show because there's just so much to talk about. Do you mind telling us about your experiences with the extraterrestrial beings?
Yes. Well, it first started for me when I was a child, and I had encounters with different beings, but I just wasn't always sure exactly what they were. So I had people who I called the Watchers, and the Watchers are still there, but the Watchers were watching what was happening for me, in a way keeping me safe, but also, and stepping in if I needed, if something really important happened that could potentially, I suppose, harm me or take my life. And I'm not talking about things that were necessarily around situations in just day-to-day life. I'm talking about if something was under threat, they would intervene. I'm sure about that. But they were monitoring and watching, and they were also making sure that certain things happened when as they needed to. Then when I was about 5, 6, I always thought of her as a witch came into my room, and she appeared in the corner up in sort of the juncture of the ceiling and 2 walls. And she was in mist, and it was just her head. It was very much a caricature of, in a way, Disney witches. Now, we know Disney is all programming as well, but it was a witch, definitely a witch. And she was cackling, and she was watching, and she had an energy about her that was a bit sinister. But she also, I knew she wasn't going to hurt me. It was just more, there was an energy about her that I just really didn't like. And she came and visited me regularly. And many years on, I was doing a presentation with a group of other people who'd had experiences, and you go off and do your stuff on front of the stage, and then you do stuff, sometimes you have the conversation backstage. And we were very clear, we were all really supportive of one another, which was actually really nice as well, because often you just go and do your thing and you come back, and we were all part of something else, which was really quite special. It was for me anyway. And we were all saying our own stories, but there were similarities to them. And then we were all becoming clearer and clearer that the different ways that different beings can manifest. And so people often see some beings as clowns, which is just another form of a manifestation of a being. And the witch was another form of a manifestation of a being. But my mother had always also, I discovered many years later, seen a witch when she was a child. So I think there's also an element of things go on through families, definitely. Certainly speaking at UFOs and conferences and things like that, in my own experiences, there's definitely that, and a cumulative experience. So there was that going on. And then in my teens and 20s, I had precognitive things going on, like knew when people were going to be in accidents, knew if I was going to be in an accident. I knew when other things were happening on the other side of the earth, and in the cosmos, although I wouldn't have said it that way then. And I knew that I wouldn't say I was protected. I wouldn't say I had a feeling that I was protected, but I spoke with fairies in trees, and I had this kind of interaction with gnomes and different things that, again, was really ordinary for me. So I never really thought it was special or anything like that. And then I had things like lights activating in dark places, which meant I had a light when I was walking somewhere. And so there were things already happening. And then after the NDE, it was like the contact changed, and it became very much about a collegiate kind of communication and interaction. Okay, we're all here, let's work together. And then it was initiation processes, because so the process of a lot of the galactic interactions and interactions with ray masters, interactions with devic beings in the earth, interactions with devic beings not of this earth, there's a whole range, and beings from all sorts of places. It's a kind of process of initiations that enables you to manage energy frequencies better, for one.
Mm-hmm.
Stay grounded and stay as a colleague, and not as a, oh my God, what the hell is going on? Save me, I'm going to die person. And when you look at all the shamanic teachings from every culture and all the spiritual teachings from every culture, there is a process of a big change that is undertaken. And sometimes it's something like a near-death experience, or a spiritually transformative experience, or some kind of an illness, or a death in the family, or some terrible thing like that. But then after that, you still have these processes of initiation. And what that then allows you to do is to access other frequencies. It allows those beings from other frequencies to access you and work with you. So, and as I've mentioned before, there's layers. So part of what I have an innate ability to do is to work with things that are invisible and experience things that are invisible to the naked eye, and to understand and quantify and clarify and experience the different layers of that. And as a clairsentient, like I did, I now teach psychic and mediumship skills, but in those days when I was remembering things, and I was also part of a group, and we had gone to a church in the West Country in the UK, and it was a church that had a quite sinister history, as a lot of churches do, and it was a ruin, really. And so the person who was leading the group was a friend of mine, and often I don't know if you've done this sort of stuff, but when you go to a place and you're in a group, you kind of, everyone does their own tuning in and seeing what they're picking up, and sometimes you're picking up things from straight away when you arrive there. Mm-hmm. And other times you're not. Depends on what your skill set is and what you're there to do and all those sorts of things. And so we had time where we were walking around and doing our own attunements, and we would come back to the group and work. And there was this place I went to in the building, which was, like I said, it was a ruin. And every time I stood there, I felt like I was swinging, and that I was frightened, like I was probably going to die, and that I was also suffocating. So there was a range of things that I was feeling in my body. Wow. And I'd step back, and then when I got to a certain place, I'd feel it again. And I spent quite a bit of time in that area just examining the different layers of that experience. And also was having flashes of information while I was doing that. So it's not just kinesthetic, it's all the different ways you receive information, which may be visual, it may be or all sorts of different ways. And also smells. I get a lot of smells. So all of those things were going on. But there was, and other people in the group were in different areas. So no one was looking or being in the area I was in. So I thought, this is really interesting to me. And I'm going to go and get somebody I know who of the group, and I'm going to ask them to come and stand where I'm standing to see what they get. So I did that. And over a period of time, over a year or so, I realized that, because often in mediumship, if you're a visual medium and you get images and you get sound, well, that's more of an oral thing. But if you're getting, you know, some people get Hollywood images,
Right?
and they see the white knight charging down the road and or pathway, and they see all of that. And for people who are kinesthetic, who've never really had any experiences other than their gut instincts or something like that, it can be quite intimidating. And also for people who hear things. So visual can often be very intimidating for those who aren't predominantly visual. But what I realized in my thing was that I was actually picking up stuff that people weren't even it just wasn't in their pickups.
So the person you asked to stand in that space wasn't getting the same thing.
No,
It wasn't.
but then
Yeah.
when we came back as a group, and I'm always careful what I share, because you know you can prompt
Right.
someone.
You don't want to front load. Yeah.
Yeah, you can prompt somebody. But then when they came back as a group and we started to discuss things, then people got that, but they still didn't get the pickup I did. And so for me, it's that sense of that became a clue to me about a skill set that I had, rather than just being unable to do things that other people did.
So did you feel that was a mediumship hit, or do you feel that was a past life?
I think it's a combination.
Oh,
I think
okay.
it's a combination. It was definitely a mediumship hit,
Okay.
definitely a mediumship hit.
Mm-hmm.
But I was also aware of the potential of being in that place at that time.
Okay.
So that could be that all it was the imprint that allowed the part of me that was navigating that to feel it from a past life perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So it could have been a past life, and I'm happy to say it is, but I'm also happy to say that was just another way of enabling me to pick up that information.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people talk about, and I've had a couple of experiences where I've been in an area and felt and recalled some, and it's mainly, like you said, that feeling, that clairsentience of, I know I've been here before type of thing. There was, I was standing on the top of well, it didn't have a top anymore, Mount Hood, not Mount Hood, Mount St. Helens. And I just had this, oh my gosh, my dog, sorry. So I had this image or this memory, I feel, of jumping off that mountain. Yeah, but I remember feeling so free that I was flying. I didn't have any feeling of sadness or grief or fear or anything like that. It just felt so free. And I knew I had been there before. I don't know if I did that, or maybe it was after I passed or anything like that. But it was so like I was saying, I didn't feel that I didn't feel sad or anything like that. I don't know if I had passed and then I was flying and jumping off, or if I jumped off and that's how I died. I don't know, but I just knew I had been there, and then I had that experience. That was one of the experiences I had. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because like for me, I think of those as like a deja vu experience, like having been there and absolutely clear. So I've had those, and one of the places I was working, and I was in Malta, and I was driving a car to a place that in this life I had never been before. And I was investigating different earth energy patterns and the different cultural implications a whole load of stuff. And they have a lot of tall spires on buildings there, which the buildings look like churches, but they can also be something different. So I was in my investigations, I was in that sort of like, there's lots of different layers, just allow the layers to manifest as they want to. And as I was driving along, there was a church spire in the distance, and then there was another one slightly closer. Came into the village, reduced speed, you know, you slow down because you're into a village. And as I went round a bend, I thought, oh my God, I've been here before. And then my whole body just started tingling. And then I was getting a whole load of what people would call downloads, which then it was just insights. But these days with computers, everything's a download. But so I was getting all these insights, and I thought I need to stop because I can't drive and get this information. And I thought I need to park somewhere. And there was lots of activity because it was quite a significant sized town. And so I thought, well, if I, like I said, I've never been there before. If I go down this road, turn left, there's a parking space there. There's a car park. So I drove there thinking, yeah, that's the past telling me about the present. And I had experiences there as a knight in during the time of the Templar Knights. So, and then I also went back further in time to another experience as a novitiate at one of the goddess temples. So those for me were different to that experience in the church, where the experience in the church or the ruins of the church where I felt this stuff, I was to some degree fully experiencing the experiences of the people who died there. But I also could well have been having an experience of having had a past life there or somewhere else with a similar experience. But the one in Malta, in some of the other places I've had them, was a definite, this is a past life, deja vu, you were here, this is what you did, this is why you're here now, and this is what you're going to do now.
Yeah, when you experience it, there's nothing, no one can tell you that it's your imagination.
No.
You know it's real.
And it's a very visceral experience, isn't it? You feel it in your cells, you feel it in your heart experiences it, and it experiences it emotionally, but it also experiences it like with the change of beat or
yeah. I thought I was gonna fall over or pass out. I felt off balance, you know, it was just like, ooh, whoa.
And it's interesting you say that, because that makes me think of some of my encounters with praying mantises, because you were asking me about ETs.
Yes.
And all different ones I have, but with praying mantises and golden praying mantises that I have encounters with, and they're often to do with working with the grids and working with the energy patterning and frequencies in specific places to help elevate them. But some of the golden praying mantises have such strong energy that your physical body's kind of doing this to then bring it back into balance. And I remember one of the times I encountered one of them, and I was with somebody else, and I don't know whether she'd encountered them before or not, I don't know. But in that particular encounter between her and I and the praying mantises, she just couldn't stay standing. And she kept having to sit down, and then she'd it was like a vertigo thing happening for her. And so some of them, the experiences are so strong that it's not imagination at work.
That's interesting that you have experiences with the praying mantis. I know I do. I've just remembered a couple of experiences recently, even though I felt connected to them and have experienced them in my meditations before, where they've met me when I've gone to look at my records at the Akasha, and they've met me there. And I just had this, and they were white. And what I recall is they were light filled and white. And I just felt this really reverent energy with them, this regalness and pure love and consciousness from them. So I don't recall hearing about golden praying mantis though. Can you describe what they're all about?
Well, my understanding of them, and you may speak to somebody else and they'd say something different, because I do think the encounters we have are relative to each of us
Yes.
to
Yes.
some degree. But my experience of them, they're bigger, and they're more, and their frequency is different. So they're in the physical, but they're in a very strong non-physical presence as well, and a very energetic, high frequency, and they make a clicking sound. And sometimes that clicking sound is them working with frequencies, and other times it's actually, like cicadas or cicadas, depending on how you pronounce it, they make that clicking noise, and certain insects make a clicking noise. So it's something inherent to do with them as well. And they're not the drones. There's drone praying mantis beings, and they will tend to, in my experience, they tend to be more upright. And I see them, but I haven't worked with them. I've tended to work with the golden praying mantis beings. Okay. And they, for me, were not necessarily upright.
They were more bent over.
Yeah. And they were just, but their frequencies were so big, and that was very loving. And I know people who've not had loving experiences with praying mantis. So for me, they were very loving, but it was a very strong presence. And I would feel I could imagine that if you came across it out of the blue, which you can in any work, but if you came across it out of the blue and you didn't recognize the calling card, so to speak, of them, and if you were starting to fall over or starting to feel like you can't go down that road there because something's happening down there, it could feel really manipulative. But not in the same way that other people have experiences with praying mantises, where they have some sinister encounters. They've had sinister encounters. People have had really good encounters, and people have not. And that comes down to each individual person. So they come. When I experience them, it's an old energy template that's being either protected or reworked, and something's happening around it, but they're holding that frequency so that it doesn't get damaged.
I see.
That's my experiences with them on this planet.
Okay.
Because all of them can come from different places, and you can go with them and have different experiences. And I'm not talking about abductions. I'm talking about things like going through portals and that sort of stuff. So yeah, there's all different beings, and like sometimes they're physical experiences, like I said, they can knock you over. But with another group of beings that I work with, I've opened portals and helped open portals and different things for tall whites to leave or to arrive in, and Pleiadian beings to have access to different places.
Oh, wow.
And a few years back, I was at a conference, and it's a UFO oriented conference, and often at those places, some weird things happen. As all the energy frequencies come together, and people may have visits in the night, or they may have dreams, or different things happen. And where I was staying, in the room I was staying in, there were beings around, and I was having communication with them. Anyway, I went to bed, and it was I don't know, I suppose a queen double bed, so it wasn't a king, it wasn't a small one, but it was. So, and I was laying in the middle of the bed, and I had turned I think I'd read for a bit. Anyway, I turned the light out, and I was surveying bed, and I could feel a lot of them coming forward, and they were smallish white beings with quite large heads, and biggish eyes. And one of them sat on the end of the bed, And I didn't realize that I want to say he, but probably wasn't a he, it was more androgynous. I didn't realize he'd sat on the bed because I was sort of looking at other ones on the other side of the bed. And I moved my foot, as you do, you know, you just get more comfortable. And I accidentally knocked him off the bed. And so, you know, oh, I'm really sorry about that. But the next day I happened to be talking to somebody about it because we were talking about different things that had happened in the night. And he said, oh my God, you had a physical encounter. That's amazing that you had a physical encounter. And I thought it's really interesting because, yes, it is a physical encounter, but I didn't really think of it as that way. I felt like I'd accidentally kicked somebody off the bed. So, you know, they'll come in as light bodies, they'll come in as physical beings, they'll come in through telepathic communication, and you have that sense of them and the presence of them. Like when in the early days for me of when I was really having a strong process of remembering a lot of things I used to do and meeting a lot of those beings and guides and different frequency beings in order to develop and renew, actually is what it was, renew the relationships with them and realign and do all that sort of stuff. And one of the beings who came in was Akhenaten, and I don't know if you know who Akhenaten is.
Oh, definitely. Yes, yeah. I do.
And so he appeared in the living room.
He appeared where?
Pardon?
What did you say? He appeared where?
In the living room.
Oh.
And you know, and all sorts of beings, you know, if they need to see you, they'll come. Or if they need to, and so, you know, he would come in and he'd tell me about what was what was relevant to what was going on at the planet on the planet at that time. But he would also, I had a strong sense of my relationship with him and Tutankhamun and, you know, all the other Egyptian energy frequencies. So but he felt he needed to come in, and he would come in periodically. It was almost like on not quite a Friday night gathering, but he'd come in regularly, and there were other beings who would come in regularly
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. They would come in regularly, and they would take, like I said, sometimes they'd be really strongly physical. Other times it would be like a big orb or an energy of some kind, and they come in depending on how they need to manifest for each of us.
I've always felt a kinship with Akhenaten myself, so it didn't surprise me because we've talked about this. We seem to have a lot of similarities. Yeah. I have to know what Akhenaten looked like. What was he wearing? What did he, you know, I have to know. Was he dressed like an Egyptian, an ancient Egyptian, or was he, you know, wearing jeans and a t-shirt? What was he?
Okay. Well, he can manifest in different ways, as you know, hence the t-shirt and jeans.
Right.
He doesn't tend to manifest in t-shirt and jeans for me. Metatron does, but
who?
Metatron does.
Oh, Metatron. Oh, that's hilarious. He's funny. Metatron has manifested for me in very funny ways.
Yes.
Well, I wouldn't say manifested, but come to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's like the trickster energy at times. He's funny. He's very, very funny, and
yes,
great respect for him. And he comes in with humor. He's lovely.
Yes, definitely.
So when that Akhenaten first came, he came. Now I don't know how familiar you are with the many different statues of Akhenaten, but there's some where Akhenaten's got his arms crossed on his chest, and he's like got a scepter or a staff or an ankh or something in one arm, and he was like that, almost like one of the statue appearances of himself, but he wasn't stone looking. He was golden, and he had an Egyptian persona, and he had not a loincloth, but what the pharaohs would in their very basic attire. So he did have a headpiece on.
Okay.
But other times he looks more like he does in some of those pictures you see where people say he's got Marfan syndrome and he looks a bit deformed.
With the long head?
And the long head and the bone structure. And for me, that's his origins from the stars.
Right, yeah.
So that's, and sometimes he'll come in as like a golden glow. How does he come in for you?
Oh, he doesn't come in for me like that. I just feel his presence whenever I connect with him. I feel him and I feel a connection with him. But I've not never, but I don't recall working with him closely. Well, I take that back. 20 years ago, I was working with him closely, but not as much as I was with the other masters. But I've
Right.
always felt that a kinship with him where we know each other on some
Yeah.
level, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a nice feeling, and I have that too. And he, I mean, there's a lot of mystery that has been explained to me, but also mystery still to be discovered in the mainstream about Akhenaten and about what he was involved in, and also about how Tutankhamun really died, and the connection between Howard Carter and Tutankhamun is not well known. So there's lots of information and conversations I have around that. And I went to, in Cairo, one time I went to the museum, and there was a big display. There's an even bigger display in the new museum, which I haven't been to, of Akhenaten and other pharaohs and gods. But I went there and I could just feel the absolute energy of him and Nefertiti, but also there was a lot of stuff about Tutankhamun, and I was really moved by what was in the museum, because there was that sense for me of a bit like rape and pillage, you know, when people come in and invade and they take things.
Yeah.
And I had that really strong sense. And maybe a week later, I was on the West Bank, and so I'd crossed the Nile and went to the West Bank, excuse me, and picked up the bus to go around through the West Bank to see some sights. And I'd already been to the Hatshepsut temple a few days before. So my major plan was to go to the tomb of Tutankhamun. And there were, I don't know, maybe 12 people in all on the bus, or 10, 12, something like that. And most of the people on the bus were going to the Ramses. And if they could fit it in, they'd go to the Tutankhamun. And I was the only one on the bus who, like, I'm going to Tutankhamun. And the bus driver, the Egyptian bus driver, said to me, well, you can only go in there. No, he was a bit like, oh, why are you going there? And why aren't you going? Ramses is beautiful. I was like, oh, yes, I'm sure. But this is the one I feel like I need to go. You know, that whole thing where you suddenly feel like you're having to defend something you don't actually feel you need to defend, but you kind of do in some way.
Yeah.
And so he dropped me there, but he said to me, you won't be able to go in there for very long, because the guard who is there, and you'll have to pay him money, the guard who is there will only let you in for 10 minutes. I won't be coming back this way for another hour, an hour and a half or something, and it's a 10-minute walk to the next tomb. So he'd given me all these instructions based on his belief systems. And so anyway, I got off the bus and I walked down towards the opening that they had created of the original tomb, and there was nobody there. And I thought, well, I'll stand here for about 5-10 minutes or something and just wait, because I'm happy to wait, and I'll just sense in on the energies while I'm there, and there's no problem. Anyway, after about 10 minutes, still nobody had come, and Akhenaten came forward and he said, this is for you, in you go.
Go in. And
so I went in there, and I was in there for about, I'm probably going to get some guard into trouble here. I don't know where they were. I saw no sign of them. Whether they were in another dimension to me, I don't know, but I saw no sign of them, and I spent about an hour and a half in that tomb.
Wow, nice.
And everything else in there.
I won't let them know.
It was a long time ago, maybe a long time ago. But so
that's amazing. So they set that up for you.
Yeah.
I've always had, whenever I connect or think, feel into Tutankhamun, I always felt sadness and bad for him. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I had there's a lot of information about that, and I'm hesitating to share it because I'm not quite sure if I'm allowed to share it or not. Like, not that I want to be secretive, but I think in a lot of the work that I do, there's timings, isn't there? I'm sure with your work too, there's timings, and if you share the information too soon, well, I guess firstly people wouldn't hear it. They just won't hear it.
They can only hear what they can hear. Yeah.
We've spoken to many a brick wall in our life, I'm sure, but they won't hear it. But also,
and still do.
I don't want to be the person responsible for sharing information if it's not meant to, and I'm kind of getting a bit of a sense of not being certain. So to explain that more, instead of, and we'll come back to Tutankhamun, because I think there was a lot of stuff that was that was really inappropriate that happened, and there were priests involved, and there was stuff that went on that was really quite sinister.
You're talking about during his life, or with the
both life,
and the entombing,
and what happened, and then where Akhenaten and Nefertiti are, and what happened there. So there's stuff that went on. But like in relation to finding things and not being able to share it, and I'll give you an example of that, but not in Egypt. I was in the Mediterranean. I was looking through, I was exploring remote viewing and also doing physical interactions with different sites. And I was on an island, and I was looking out to look for evidence. And this was not me going, I'm going to look for evidence of these things. It was like, that's what they were saying, just have a look, see what you pick up there. And I was looking for evidence about our ancient origins as a human species on the planet, that kind of thing. And there was a beacon that lit itself up and drew me out to sea. So I was about a mile out to sea. So I'm sitting on an island, I'm out to sea. And the water was about 350 feet deep or something. And there was a beacon underneath, so I was drawn to go down to that underwater. And I saw what looked to me like a shipwreck. And I saw pots strewn around and the ship and different things. And I saw that, and I didn't want to disturb it. I just wanted to have a look and see what relevance it had and pick up the information I needed. And so for me, it was very much about the ancient origins of the Phoenicians around the planet and where they did, and their connection back to places like Atlantis and other past histories. So I looked into that, and the image of that, what I saw, stayed with me, like it became a picture in my mind. Anyway, later, I was asked, and some years later, I was asked to write about that in a book that I was writing. And I was thinking, well, okay, I can't write about that because that ship hasn't been found yet. So I have to disguise it. And they were like, yes, we'll disguise it, blah, blah, blah. So I wrote about it as a Turkish galleon that I found. I wrote about it as, and there was an ancient mariner in there who was the captain of that ship. I wrote about it as an ancient mariner who was of Turkish descent. And I talked about my experiences with that. And then about 17 or 18 years later, there was not a depth, some whatever the machine is that they have where they can look through the water and see what's there.
Oh, right. It sends out waves or sonic waves or something like that.
Mm-hmm. They discovered the boat, and then they went down and had a look into the wreck, and they took pictures, and they saw exactly what I saw. Now that was 17 years later, and I knew very strongly, and then they began to share that it was a Phoenician wreck. Now, when I found it, Phoenician wrecks, that people didn't really talk about Phoenician wrecks, not in my circles anyway, maybe in other circles, in archaeology circles. They didn't really talk about Phoenician wrecks. But so I knew at the time that if I shared that information, whatever it was, whatever the reasons I'd been asked to look and find it, and it was also about placing frequencies and encoding different energies for the raising of the divine feminine consciousness, if it had got found too quickly and shared too quickly, either I may have had to go back there or someone else would have had to go back there to do other work. So it was about making sure that the information comes out at the right time for the collective to take it.
Interesting.
So like another time, actually when I was in Egypt, and I went to a stone circle, not a stone circle, a solar temple that was ruins. And I was with a group of people and we had gone there to do some work, but I was doing what I was doing as well as what we were doing within the group. And I had my camera. Now I take pictures of lots of different sites, and I ask if it's okay to do that. But back then I didn't really take many pictures of sites. I had my camera and I was walking around this site and people were doing their attunements, and then at the end of it we gathered, a bit like at that old building I was talking about. And everywhere I went, there were these Syrian images all over the rocks, in the sand, everywhere. And I'd walked through the desert to get there. And so I was really interested in the Sirius connection and how that's part of that Egyptian connection as well. So it was fascinating to me that I kept seeing these Syrian symbols everywhere, drawn on things and like almost like carved into stone. So I excuse me, I took pictures of them because I thought, well, this is great, I'll have the pictures. I asked permission, yes, you can take them. And this was in the days when film camera, not what we've got now, SD cards. I took all the pictures, and then when we came back together as the group and we were talking about all the things that were there, we talked about different aspects of it. And then I was going to say something about the symbols, and then I thought, well, that's like saying to somebody who's wearing black, you're wearing black, you know, because they were so obvious. It's like, right, don't state the obvious, you know. It's like they were so obvious to me.
They're symbols, yeah.
Anyway, so we had conversations about different things and the different energy templates and patterns there. And then when I was walking back through the desert with this friend of mine, and I said to him, oh, those symbols are amazing, weren't they? And he said, what symbols? And I said, all the symbols on the rocks. And he said, I didn't see any. And I went, I was like dumbfounded, because he's also incredibly good at seeing stuff and feeling stuff and hearing stuff. So I said, well, you know, on that rock, blah, blah, blah. And I said, that's okay, don't worry, I've taken pictures of them. I'll show you them when I get them developed. And that film disappeared from my camera.
That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah. So right time.
So it was meant for you.
Oh, yeah.
At that time.
It was meant for me. It was again one of those confirmations and affirmations of the things that we do, isn't it? And that's right. The wondrous thing about how spirit and how the different beings work.
Definitely. Paulina, let's stop here.
Okay.
And save some for our next show.
Okay.
Okay. Our next chat, because I definitely want to get into galactic history and your work with the Earth, Mama Earth, and all of that. Okay.
Yeah.
Because we have so much more to talk about, and it's really important. It's really important that we understand and know. You don't have to understand it, but know our galactic history, right? Our history as humanity, yes. and it helps us move forward. I think, I feel, so I'm so happy to be able to communicate and talk with and a new friend here who is in that world, because there's not a lot of people that haven't stepped into that world yet.
We're getting there, aren't we?
Yes, we are. Yeah. So I'm so happy that that we are finding our tribe again. Thank you so much for sharing. Is there any final words of wisdom for part one that you would like to share with the audience?
I don't know if there's words of wisdom, But I would think we're in a time where there's a lot of change going on, and a lot of people are recognizing different frequencies of different things, including the exposure of what's been going on this planet for a long time that many people haven't been aware of. And when we get information, no matter what it is, a part of our left brain wants to make sense of it and wants to place it into context of what's been before, and to make sense of it so that we can live with it and not feel frightened and not feel worried about things. Our left brain does that, but our right brain knows what's there all the time. And our heart has a resonance that connects with absolutely everything. And love is the foundation of all that there is. And that was absolutely clear to me during the near-death experience. And so if we hold on to the knowledge and the understanding that while everything else looks like it might be going pear-shaped, this is the great reveal that we have come here for, in order to be able to develop our cosmic memory, develop our galactic consciousness, understand more about our connection to the stars and who we are. And it takes as long as it takes. And love is the foundation and always has been the foundation and cannot be taken away from the foundation. And how lucky each of us is to be here for this journey, and that we didn't choose to be amoebas in space, that we chose to come here onto planet Earth, this beautiful planet, who is working with us in all ways to help us to elevate our consciousness. And so I think that's helpful to remember on those days when you feel wobbly, those days when you feel uncertain about what to do. What would love do? If it doesn't sound like love, what does love sound like? If you don't feel a connection to the earth, how can you connect with the earth? Those things, so that you can make it about a journey of going within, not looking without for the answers.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Yes, that was beautiful. Okay, wonderful to talk to you. And thank you everyone for being here. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Please like the video. How could you not like this, right? And also put your comments down below so that we can, maybe have a conversation about what Pauline shared, and let us know what you think. And also hit that notification button, as everyone says, so that you can be notified of any of all these amazing videos that we're in, conversations that we're having here. Okay, thank you everyone. I love you dearly. Mwah. See you next time.
Bye for now.